number one. One more than one, you can raise number one.
Okay, raise number one. Okay, raise number one.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
Yo, I've joined.
Hello, Patrick. How are you?
Yeah, fine, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, other
I hope you
panelists.
can hear me. Oh,
Yes, I
good.
can hear you very clearly.
Wonderful. Oluchukwu Ona, can you hear us? If you can hear us, just let us know. We'll just take like 2 more minutes to wait for Obina Uguja, and then for Odinaka Eze. Just wait for them for about 2 more minutes. I know that Odinaka is just around. And so, now, medical history of Eastern Nigeria. Joining now. So, okay, Obina, you're welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Odinaka, can you hear us? Odinaka is yet to fully gain entrance. Oluchuku Jacinta Ona, can you hear us? If you can hear us, unmute yourself and let us know. Okay, so the 2 minutes has elapsed. We will get started. When they join us, they can always follow from the point which they meet us. Good evening and welcome to this session. It is titled Medical History of Eastern Nigeria. And we have 4 presenters. Patrick Opaleke and James Aban Eka of the University of Uyo will be presenting on dysentery epidemic in Arochukwu, Owerri Province, 1940 to 1944. Odinaka Eze of the University of Mississippi will be presenting on crossroads, leprosy, and Igbo worldview during colonialism. And Oluchukwu Jacinta Ona will be presenting on our health, our strength, indigenous health practices in Ihapu Oka by the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. And finally, Obina Ugu of UNN would be presenting on Dibia Ara, revising the Nsukka Igbo psychiatric healing since pre-colonial times. So I hope everyone can hear us now. Odinaka, are you with us? Please unmute yourself and let us know if you can hear us. Oluchukwu Jacinta, can you hear us? Okay, we will proceed. I know that they may be struggling with the network. By way of openness, I have to say that I am very impressed by the titles that are framed for presentation in this conversation. When daring to ask if I would be interested in chairing a panel of medical history, I was select titles that pushed for me to do that. So I wasted no time in accepting to, moderate this conversation. And I want to commend all of you for this wonderful titles. So in this order that I have just read these presentations, we will take 10 minutes from these 4 papers. Then we will use the remaining an hour plus to engage the papers, raise conversations, and make the best of the time. So take the first paper from Patrick. Patrick, you have 10 minutes.
Very much, Dr. Alex. My name is Patrick, and I'm presenting a paper on dysentery epidemic. I'm presenting it alongside my co-author, Dr. James Eka, both from the University of Uyo. So before I proceed, I would like to please ask that a bit of an error on the title. It should be Calabar province between 1940 and 1942, but I think subsequently I'll communicate with Professor Said on that. So the year 2020 was one.
You said that the turn is 19.
Yeah, it should be
1941.
Calabar province, 1940, 1942, not 44. Did you get that?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the year 2020, that is the year of the COVID-19, indeed mark a watershed for the history of colonial public healthcare, or generally issues that bordered on healthcare, not just in Nigeria, but the entire world. And because Chinedu Uba in 1992 lamented that not much attention have been given to medical history in as much as the southeastern Nigeria is concerned. So myself and my co-author, we decided to contribute to that ongoing debate by way of looking at some of the health crises that occurred in colonial southeastern Nigeria between 1960. Although it's a research in progress, but I think what I'll be doing here today is I'll be discussing on some of the findings, both in a thematic and a geographical sense of the research. The work actually is basically trying to contribute to existing literature on epidemics, on colonial public healthcare, and the social history of medicine. That is to say, how the indigenous people reacted to some of the orthodox or alien practices of medicine that were being introduced into southeastern Nigeria during that period. Of course, Arochukwu was one of the various districts that also experienced a plethora of events, from the 1918-1919 Spanish influenza to the issue of the 1929 Women's War, and all these things impacted both on the economic and political structure in Arochukwu as well as in other old eastern region of Nigeria. But then what really happened is this: because Arochukwu is situated in a position where it has a peninsula, that is the Calabar River and the Eyon Creek surrounds it. So it simply means that whatever outbreak of disease occurs in that area will have a faster spread, making it therefore not just an endemic, but an epidemic. And secondly, we discovered that during that period, the colonial government was actually trying to ensure that it has enough population for labor, that's to help push for her economic interests. So we can also argue that most of the things that were dished out during that period, even in terms of healthcare, basically was not just for the good alone of the people, but also to sustain them so that labor can, continue to be supplied whenever needed. But fundamentally, I think despite the fact that we have seen the morbidity rate was very high, at least something that within 2 to 3 months, we had about 6,000 death rates in Arochukwu area. That's Arochukwu division made up of different districts, the Ihe district, the Ututu district, and the rest of them. The most important thing is this: as a normal fashion for the colonial government, swift response was, initiated. And that response was simply to send the medical and sanitary service department. Specifically, by this time, the colonial government already realizes that it is not just enough to initiate curative approach to health and wellness for these people, for the indigenous people, but it is even better to actually ensure that there's always preventive measures on ground. And that is where I'm going to talk about the sanitary inspectors, or what we term sanitary inspectorates. They were those who were issued with the task of ensuring that the society was healthy, hygienic, free from all form of things that will likely cause outbreak of disease at very large scale. So in the case of Arochukwu, these colonial sanitary officers were sent, and based on their findings, they actually discovered the root cause, which has to do with open latrine, open places of defecation. People were just defecating everywhere. So, it became a beehive of flies. And from these flies contaminated food and what have you. But then what happened is this: finding the root causes are not just enough. There needs to be some form of drastic measures to curb further spread. And what was this? First and foremost, sanitary measures were put in place, which has to do with cleanliness of the area. There was a suggestion from the then sanitary superintendent, who was Mr. McDivitt. He suggested that Saga, I can't actually share my screen, but Saga latrines should be constructed, I think a 20-foot deep and about 10-foot width. So this was one of the things suggested, that they should have Saga latrine across the vicinity so that people don't defect anyhow. But probably you can use something that when you're done to be properly covered, prevent flies from spreading the bacteria that causes this particular dysentery. But unfortunately for the colonial government, they were met with some resistance. And this happened to be the fact that some of the measures, like the one of digging the Saga latrine, was in sharp contrast with some of the custom of the people, particularly the Ututu women, or what they actually call their umbrella body. The Ututu ancient women became a force that resisted most of the colonial sanitary measures, making it very impossible or difficult for those measures to be implemented. What did they do? They started by making demonstrations. They started by going around trying to canvass the youth not to engage in the construction of those saga. They actually also sent their representative to talk to the district officer, informing him that some of these measures contradicted, because for them it was a crime for a man to be buried while probably doing it to be covered by sand. They find it very, very sacrilegious as against their customs. But then the colonial government said, okay, we are going to see how we can resolve the issue by way of reducing the depth from 20 foot maybe to 10 foot. But the long and short story is simple. These women put up a very strong form of resistance to the extent that the police from the native court actually came, one of those instances, arrested 12 women and locked them up. But the district officer knew very well that 1929 was not just too far from 1940. And what actually transpired in 1929 could actually repeat itself again. So what did he do? He swiftly released those women without asking them to pay a dime. But the women, being very steadfast and very tough women, they continued their resistance, they continued their protests, they even went to the native court, interrupted court sections, and even almost attacked the district officers, right? So in one of those times, I think they just couldn't have it. But then the district officers said, I'll have to read it very quickly, advised women to go away from the native court and not to interfere with court proceedings. However, as the prisoners left the court, they were rescued from me and their escort, and the crowd was ugly. I was able to get ahead of the crowd in my car, being spat upon frequently, and to draw it across to the road near Ameke meeting place in order to hold them up. I attempted to talk to them, but the cat calls continued. After a while, I explained that it was one thing to oppose sanitary measures, another thing to defy the authority of government. The district officer had to pamper the women, knowing full well of what the women could actually do, considering 1929 was not too far from 1940, 1941, 42. At the end of the day, the women actually now sought the legal services of a particular lawyer known as Mr. Lakija, who was then a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, placing charges that 12 of their members were arrested, and they wanted to press legal charges and to get some form of respite for their members. But the long and short story is this: the document needed for that particular legal action to be taken was denied Mr. Lakija. At the end of the day, sanitary measures were put in place, but the people still stood their ground and refused to engage in the work process, as well as refused to use some of those saga latrines that were constructed. So the end point is this: issues of health, whether in colonial period or in post-colonial period, are very critical. Sometimes it is important that messages, measures to curb health crisis must be properly communicated to those who need this help remedy. We saw in the COVID-19, many of us actually read a lot of things, and these things are not new because during colonial period, we were almost also there. So I think the dysentery epidemic is not just another case of showing the colonial response to health disease, but also show a genderized, that is my intervention. I'm showing where not just the men, but the women particularly, because they no longer trusted their men. Of course, during colonial rule, bribery was very rife among native court workers and warrant chiefs. So the women did not trust their men. They decided to take the fate of their community in their hands. And that was exactly what happened between 1940 and 1942 in Arochukwu area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. And I'm happy that just about 2 minutes to 10 minutes you were able to summarize presentation. Aldinaka, are you here now? Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Oh, wonderful. Thank God. Oluchukwu, Ona, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you. Yes, sir.
Oh, wonderful. All right. So I'm sure that you people were struggling with the network when we started the conversation. So in the order in which the papers have been slated, we will take the next paper from Odinaka Eze, which is titled Crossroads, Leprosy and the Igbo Worldview During Colonialism. Odinaka, you have 10 minutes to discuss your paper, and then every other person that would present will also have to take 10 minutes, after which the remaining 1 hour plus we use it to engage the teams and raise conversations. All right, so Odinaka, you have the floor now. Is Odinaka still here with us? Not sure.
I don't think.
Odinaka, are you still with us? I'm not seeing him equally.
I don't think so. I can't see.
I think I would have to message him to leave. Okay, he's still struggling.
Okay.
Odinaka, are you with us now? Are you with us? Can you hear me?
Doctor, maybe you can send me a message to unmute.
I'm not sure he's muted. His network.
I think
you can also send a message to him too.
It's affecting your audio. Maybe you should disconnect from your AirPods, please.
Okay, so we'll take another. We'll take the third paper. If in the next 30 seconds he's not able to join fully, we will have to ask Ms. Ona to speak to us. Odinaka, are you with us now?
Yes, I can hear you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We've just waited for you to get through with the network. So you have 10 minutes to tell us what you have. And so we continue
all
from
right,
there.
Thank you very much. The topic of my research is Crossroads, Leprosy Disease and Igbo Cultural Worldview. But as this paper is a continuous writing, I've added to the title, Leprosy, Disease and Igbo Cultural Worldviews in Eastern Nigeria, 1927 to 1960. The purpose of this paper is to conceptualize leprosy disease in Igbo society and how it changed during the colonial period, when the colonial medicine brought hope to the destitute sufferers of the disease. That is one of the aims of this paper. Another aim of this paper is to conceptualize the nature of the ideological foundations of leprosy disease in order to validate the interplay of colonial power in Eastern Nigeria. It also theorizes that the way that Igbo people thought about leprosy, the shifting ideas continue to impact the experiences of leprosy sufferers in the region, even up to this point. The paper also tries to address the understanding, to attempt to understand how leprosy disease and other infectious diseases fits into the Igbo cosmic epistemology. And finally, it also provides the framework for contextualizing the attitude and reactions of the Igbo to the disease during colonialism and also extending it to the present period. These are the purpose of this paper. And just to give a little context, Nigeria, or Eastern Nigeria particularly, was one of the epicenter of leprosy disease in colonial Nigeria and also throughout the British Empire. At some point, one of the leprosy centers, Uzo Akole, was housing one of the highest numbers of leprosy sufferers in the British West Africa. In the 1930s and the 1940s, and that was why I chose Igbo land to be the fertile ground for this paper, not to understand how does this understand the ideas of leprosy, how has it transited in Igbo land, what has changed, what has not changed, because of all the diseases that were incurable or intractable in the pre-colonial Igbo land, leprosy was one of the most foremost one to blow into full epidemics during the 1930s and 1940s. And as a result of it, it's attracted attention by the colonial government. Like when I went to the archives, I saw several documents talking about leprosy because that was one of the primary assignments that the colonial government had to fight. And not just only that, leprosy also was also foundational in the establishment of public health institutions in Nigeria. So I wanted to see how this idea of leprosy, came into being and how it has transited over the period. There has been several scholars that have done this, but unfortunately, they just mentioned this in passing, that leprosy, this was how the people thought about leprosy, and they would just leave it that way. They don't go into details to explain or to show you the changes over time of how people thought about leprosy. And as we all know, leprosy and the fight against leprosy disease in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s up to independence was well intertwined with Christianity. So I'm looking at when do we say that there was a sharp transition? And as my findings are as follows. Number one, in pre-colonial Igbo period, they associated leprosy with many cultural practices. For instance, because of the nature of leprosy, disfigurement of the body and all that, leprosy sufferers in pre-colonial Igbo land were seen not just as taboo, as people that have committed taboo or people that have gone against the earth goddess or people that have gone against the land, but also as people who could not attain the full circle of life, which is, because Igbo people saw life was highly anthropocentric in nature, so that you participate in the augmentation of life. Now, because you're suffering leprosy and because your hands and some parts of your body were disfigured, you could not participate actively in life. And what does that mean? What that means is that some of them were even confined in the evil forest. And what that meant was that they could not participate in life. And what it means that even if they had children before they were struck with the disease, they could not be buried properly and given befitting burial when they died. And these people, this was how they were imagined in the pre-colonial period. They were also imagined as people that brings misfortune to the family. So once you have a leprosy sufferer, you begin to segregate the person. So some people, they'll keep them in a place whereby before they give them food, they will ring a bell. This was the imagination. They didn't have any hope. But during the colonial period, something began to happen in the way that you know, I'm interrogating to know if there was actually a change, or if there was, or if what happened was a mere mutation. Because according to CN Oba, you know, he was Olisamitu, sorry, he was like, yeah, that Christianity, just like Christianity, you know, saying that Igbo people are highly accepted Christianity. But when you look at it critically, you see that what many are practicing in Igbo land is syncretism. That traditional religion is still well entrenched in the people way of life. And that is why even till today, some other groups of people which are not leprosy, like the Osu people, are not yet fully integrated into the Igbo social groups. And that is the argument that I follow. I argue that even though that during the colonial period, these destitute sufferers were given hope by the message of Christianity, Christian hope, and all that, they were still the Igbo society, the acceptance of those segregation villages or segregation camp for leprosy sufferers was as a result of the fact that even in pre-colonial Igbo society, they were being segregated, they were being reserved in a particular area, and they didn't see anything wrong with that. Because I began to see that there were several similarities between the way that leprosy sufferers were imagined in pre-colonial Igbo community and how the Christian Mission Society began to imagine them as a problem to the colonial advancement. Another conclusion that I reached was that far from the mission societies, what actually began to change the way in which people approach or the people began to think about leprosy disease was a result of of what happened with your disease. Because the early period in the 1920s, early 1930s, that leprosy was treated with monodrug therapy, it had no cure. But then with the discovery of cure for your infection, this I'm summarizing, I'm concluding, you know, they began to believe in the ability of Western medicine. And that was when the way the people think about leprosy disease began to change, began to revolutionize. But even at that, there are still some resentment. And even up to today, this idea is still well entrenched in the society that people still segregate against leprosy sufferers in many parts of Igbo land. Thank you.
Right. Interesting. Thank you very much, Odina Keze, for that sterling presentation. We would move from the second presentation to the third. That is the one from Oluchukwu Jacinta. Now, our health, our strength, indigenous health practices in Ihapu, Oka. Oluchukwu, you have the floor now. You have 10 minutes to tell us what you have done.
Okay, thank you very much. My topic is health, our strength, indigenous health practices in Ihapoka. This is a community in eastern parts of Nigeria, in Enugu State precisely. And the course of my research, I've come to see that these medical practices, there has been efficacy in these medical practices over the years, but there is decline in this practice, which I've come to discover that some of the causes of this decline is not necessarily lack of efficacy, but the need to improve in it. In this community, there are 4 major health systems. There is the Dibiangorogu, that is herbalism. There is the psychiatrist. There is the midwifery. There is also the orthopedics. These health systems are based on theories and cosmologies that takes into account the social, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and also the ecological well-being. There are some rituals and taboos associated to this medical science, which seems spiritual, but not unusual because the Africans are notoriously religious, according to Mbiti. So one of these rituals is the way of acquiring medical knowledge. There are 3 ways of acquiring medical knowledge in this community, which includes the hereditary or through inheritance. It's usually from the older generation to the younger generation. There's also one through divine call, usually through strange dreams, whereby that such individual is being given the gift to know therapeutical plants. There's another one which is through the Ibunwa Dibia or apprenticeship, whereby the person meets a traditional health practitioner to learn those herbs. There's another one known as the Ikonyukwogo, another ritual, which is Ikonyukwogo, and this ritual has to do, it's a kind of an official signing in or an official acceptance by the teacher so that the students can practice traditional medicine. So, and the philosophy of this medical science or this practice is humanity first. Most of even the bills on the drug or the payment of the bill to the treatment is usually done even after the treatment. So this is to show that they have that feeling that it is to treat humans and not necessarily to accumulate wealth. And because of this, it leads me to the third ritual, which is Nriruogu. This Nriruogu has to do with when an individual like collects much money for a treatment, and the efficacy of his medicine begins to dwell in. But there is a problem, and which is regardless of this organized medical knowledge or medical practices, they have been declined, which is because of some Eurocentric scholars terming it as unscientific because of the inability for this medicine to have a Western name. Also, Christianity has also posed a threat to this. Some fanatic Christians see this medicine as barbaric. Some see it as magical. So this has been a problem. And also colonialism has also led to opening of some Orthodox hospitals, which has competed with this health practices. So from the above points, some individuals are no more interested in practicing this medicine. Rather, they are now moving towards the Orthodox medicine. But I've come to discover that regardless of these shortcomings, that these medical practitioners are specialists in their field and they are more familiar with their environment, because one can say that there are one can say that it differs from environment to environment, and also the ecology also play a role to health. And these traditional practitioners are more in this field to understand how this works. Like in this community, there is a common illness known as the ojogu or the anareka. They used to call it ojogu anareka. It's a kind of a joint disease. It comes in form of rashes, and once it goes around the joint, it leads to the patient's death. And five among my informants, which were once victims of this disease, they are of the view that there is no Western cure for this disease, and that the the even two went to the extreme of saying that if you use Western medicine to treat this, that it will result to death. So this brings to light that there are other factors other than microbes that causes illness. So it will then be uncivil, or it will be like a mockery to say that these health practices are not civilized because it has survived over the years and be used in treating illness in this community. So I would like to say or argue that it is not the lack of faith in the efficacy of this medicine that causes the decline, but rather it is the need for improving these medical practices, because most of these drugs are usually bitter and have bad smells. So coating this medicine will help in making it look more attractive, and also the government encouraging more researchers in pharmaceutical schools that has to do with research on local plants will help in improving this medicine. Also, there should be this, when this is achieved, it will help to reduce the negative effects of the chemicals such as the additives that are being added in the modern drugs. It will also bring to consciousness among the populace that there is need to preserve their medical knowledge, because some of them are seeing this negligence as that this has, like, it is of no value. But I've come to discover that it is still very, very important and very effective. Just that some of these limitations are what are making it not to be very okay to the people to patronize, or making some of the people patronizing it to leave it, because most at times it seems that the the government are not even sponsoring it, because in orthodox medicine they do finance it for more research, but in this indigenous medicine, most times, or let me say almost usually every time, there has not been any good approach towards developing it. So another way to also solve this problem of decline in
You
traditional
have
medicine,
2 minutes to round off. You have 2 minutes to.
another way is through integrative medicine. This is a kind of a clinical approach of combining the strength of the indigenous health practice and that of the orthodox, bringing the best feature of each and then also complementing the weaknesses of each. So in conclusion, we could see that in recent times that the most threatening of human existence is in the health sector, like the COVID-19 pandemic that just happened will show us that there is more need to research in the medical line. So improvement in these medical practices and also blending, that is integrating this orthodox and the indigenous health cares, will help in improving health. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oluchukwu Jacinta Ona, for that presentation. We will now take the last but not the least paper, that is from Obina Uja DBR, revising the Nsukka Igbo psychiatric healing since pre-colonial times. Obina, the routine is that you take 10 minutes to do your presentation. You may now have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, the topic of my research is actually DBR revisiting Nsukka Igbo psychiatric healing since pre-colonial times. I'm not revising.
Revisiting.
Revisiting. Okay. So it's a common knowledge that Africans use traditional medicine to treat various illnesses before the coming of the Europeans. And the people that were usually in charge of these traditional healings were called Dibias, also known as traditional healers in English. But during the time of the colonialists, when the colonial people came to Africa, they tried to paint this method of traditional healing as being diabolic and fetish, because of mostly the method of approach that traditional healers use in conducting these healings, which involves what is called Ibafa, which translates to divination in English. This involves when a patient, probably a patient or a family of the patient, brings offerings to the native doctor, traditional healer, to consult the gods to know what actually is wrong and to find a solution to a sickness. And because of this Ibafa or divinations, traditional healing has received so much critics because of the animal sacrifices involved in conducting this traditional healing. But if you look at Orthodox medicine also, it's not actually free of sacrifices. In Western laboratories, they use animals in conducting their researches. Countless animals are killed almost every day. Every day, when the cure for a particular drug is being researched on. So if you look at it this way, both orthodox and traditional medicine is not, actually, orthodox medicine cannot be said to or be criticized for animal sacrifices because, sorry, traditional medicine cannot be criticized for animal sacrifices because it's actually also obtainable in orthodox medicine. While researching this work, which is still actually ongoing, I was able to meet some traditional healers which specialize in psychiatric healing. One of which is Emmanuel Obu, a 57-year-old psychiatric healer, which in his method of healing, he actually combines psychiatric healing and rehabilitation. This he does, like during the conversation with me, he said that a patient that ran mad through the use of drug or drug abuse, he actually keeps such a patient in his healing home for a longer period, thereby making such patients have access. So in this, he's actually helping the patients of the madness, and also helping such a patient to be free of drug abuse by not releasing the patient even after the patient has been healed. So the patient cannot be able to go back to such drugs. So another thing that is facing psychiatric healing in Nsukka is I would say Christianity and modernity, in the sense that when you meet an average person or someone that believes, someone that professes Christianity, and ask the person if the person would be willing to visit a native doctor, the person will say no because of the, but I would say like the portrayal of traditional doctors as being evil and using fetish practices. But traditional doctors are not actually fetish. In their practices, they are not actually fetish because they mostly use herbs. They mostly use herbs and then plants in their healing. And also the Igbafa that they do, which is the divination, they don't actually prepare charms, or they just consult the gods to find actually what is wrong with the patient. But if you mention to an average Nsukka patient or an average Igbo person that you went to visit a traditional doctor, the person will look at you as having an ulterior motive, as what did you go there to do? Did you go there to collect charms or to do something evil against someone else? This is a misconception of so many people against traditional healers. Traditional healers in Igbo land are originally the custodians of healing. They are the equivalent of orthodox doctors in Igbo society. Okay. Despite also the availability of psychiatric healers and the track records of their success, and during the pre-colonial times, there was a witch hunt against traditional doctors to, according to a book I read by Patrick Irebu, he says that when he was young, white men used fellow Igbo people to fight against them. Like he himself was a son of a traditional healer. So white men will use
you have 2 minutes to summarize your presentation.
Churchmen will use their fellow church members to taunt them against their father's practices. So making them to see themselves as being evil, but in actual sense, they are not actually evil. They are just healers. And the portrayal of traditional healers in Nollywood movies is not actually what they are actually. In most Nollywood movies, they are seen as being charm preparers and evildoers, but that's not actually what traditional psychiatric healers does. So in my research, I'm trying to create an awareness that traditional psychiatric healers are actually not fetish people or diabolic people, but actually healers of madness. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Obina Ubuja, for that presentation of yours. And I want to thank all the presenters thus far. And for those who are joining from the live streaming, if you have any questions or contributions to make, please do utilize the chat box so that the presenters can respond to your questions accordingly. I will give 20 minutes for the first round of questions, comments, observations, and rebuttals, if that applies. I'd like to call for questions. Okay. I will read as they come in from the chat boxes and direct. Okay, so you can also ask yourselves. You can also, if none is directed at you, use the period to maybe explain what you felt you didn't explain very well, drive it better. Okay, so there is a question. I'll start from the last, then come up. Oluchi, there is a question for you from Gozik Obiani. And you can see that question, but if you cannot, I will read here. Is there efforts made by the government to recognize these traditional healers? This is directed to, so you have just 2 minutes to respond to that question. Oluchukwu, the question is directed at you. Is there efforts made by the government to recognize these?
Yes, there has been efforts by the government to recognize these traditional healers, but this effort has not been yielding fruits, because among my class, there are about 15 of them. But when I ask them, is there any effort that the government has been making to improve this, they'll say no. Some will just say that they took them to a conference or a kind of a seminar and asked them what they know about traditional medicine. But after that, they are not being called back again. So that is why there is more need for government to involve in this, because the drugs that are working. The effect of the drug is known among my informants, among the populace. But the problem is that there is no improvement. The government are not making much effort. Their efforts are just at a very limited level. Thank you.
Hello, Obina. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please, how do you convince an average Christian to patronize traditional healers? That's from Dr. Ngozi Obiani.
Okay, how I can actually convince them to actually maybe take them to such traditional healers or tell them about their track record of successes of healing such psychiatric patients. For instance, like the traditional healers on psychiatric healing I visited in Osaka mentioned that all psychiatric healers from Enugu State comes down to Nsukka to visit them to find out their method of healing because of the success of their healing. And also sometimes they also bring down their patients from the psychiatric hospital from Enugu to visit them. Like one traditional doctor I visited at Edo Brand Enugu, they made mention of Orthodox doctors bringing down patients from Enugu states. These are patients they were not able to cure. And when they brought them to these traditional psychiatric healers, they ended up being cured and relieved of their madness. So a way of convincing them is to actually maybe take them to the houses of those people that were cured of madness, or to actually tell them. And if they are in doubt, then if they are in doubt, then maybe you can then go and visit probably people that have been healed of madness before. But it's usually difficult to talk to such people because of there's a way that madness is seen in Igbo society. Like anyone that is mad is not, the person usually doesn't actually open up about madness. The person like hides it, keeps it as a secret. So being able to convince someone of maybe opening up about a past madness that has been healed, that can also be a way of convincing someone, or visiting the native doctors. And when you visit such native doctors, you can actually see patients that are recovering from such madness. And some of them, at some points of the day, you can actually interact with them. Like during this research, I was able to interact with one man.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. We'll get back to you. I want you now to engage yourselves. We'll still go back to the chat. This is essentially a conversation between those who are presented in this area and then those who have listened, who are on the online streaming. So I want to hear your individual engagements of these papers. And then as we are doing, please, those who are following, you can just be sending your questions, directing them specifically to the people you wish to direct them to, and then we will get back to them. So do you have questions for each other? Otherwise, I want to, throw some of these questions at you as I feel. Do you have questions for each other? Yes, let's start from Patrick. Is Patrick still here? No, I think he's struggling. Okay, so after Patrick, Odinaka, do you have questions for any of your co-presenters? Or do you have a point you may want to reiterate?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go on.
All right. I wanted to ask Obinna, what do you think that the government or these institutions should do? Because one thing is that we to an extent know that these psychiatric hospitals, traditional psychiatric centers, do wonders, including the orthopedic, traditional orthopedic healers. Let me use the word. But the thing is, what do you think should be done to be recognized?
Okay, Obinna, please.
I didn't hear you mention some of those, maybe a recommendation or something like, yeah, a recommendation or something from your fieldwork. What do you think should be done for people to be recognized, for them to be legitimate, for them to operate? I'm not saying they are not legitimate, but I'm saying that many people do not still trust in them, and this is a colonial violence. Let me use the word colonial violence, and today we see that these people are important. So what do you think should be done through your work, through your research?
Thank you very much. You note that question, so I'll give, after you are done asking each other, I will give you opportunities to respond to the questions directed at you. And Patrick, you were struggling with your network. Do you have any question for your co-presenters? You just tell, and the person will note the question.
More of a comment or probably question, yeah. Okay.
Please, can you take that again?
I think both Obinna and Oluchukwu Okay, I'm trying to direct this comment or question to both Obina and Oluchukwu. It's the same
Okay, so both of you
question,
should know the
but
question.
both of them can, yes, they can actually react to it. I think their work actually emphasizes more on ethnomedicine, that's traditional form of medicine generally. I just, you were able to take in into cognizance if traditional medicine is exclusively for a particular gender. I don't know if they got me. Did you hear what I said?
You hear what he said?
Yeah.
Please, if you can hear, just wait. Let me
Yes,
be
I
clear.
can.
Okay, I'm trying to say that in the course of your research, in the course of your field work, in the course of your ethnography, were you able to just take into consideration if traditional medicine generally, whether in terms of psychiatry, whether in terms of drug production, you know, if it also allows women to participate in this? Because somewhere in Orodo, in Imo State, yeah, it is exclusively for men. And most cases, like I've done some field work, they even take oath, they don't reveal the information to women. But I would just like to know if your own different areas, that's the Oka area and the other side, Enugu, if you took this into consideration. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that you are noting these questions because you have to respond to them in the same sequence in which your presentations were made. You have to note things that were directed at you. So we will take Oluchukwu on now the question for your presence, please.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much for that question. During the course of my research, I was able to discover that this medical practices
No, please
in this
just ask your own question to your co-presenters. I will give you opportunity to respond to the ones they asked you subsequently.
Okay.
Or if you don't have, we can move on. Yes.
Okay. Let me check.
All right. While she's checking, Obina, do you have any question for your co-presenters?
No question. I don't have any question.
Okay, good. So coupled to the ones you have noted already, you can check the charts and you will see there are a couple of questions from the audience. We've read a couple of them, but Matthias says, please check the Q&A for my questions. And then Gozobiani says, three presenters, there is a new shift in the religious belief of the people, especially the youth in Igbo land. There's this kind of shift away from Christianity to African traditional religion. Do you think that this shift has in any way affected people's perception of traditional healers? So this is for all of you. You note it. And then Obin Sochima is asking, what do you recommend as a promotional strategy for DBRA to the wider world? Please, you note this. I can't see that of, and if there are other ones that were asked personally to you, please do answer them when you respond. That of Isiane, I cannot find here now. Okay, so while you take these general questions, I want to, as the chair, now engage some of the things I felt you should also consider while you go about making the best out of the paper that you're writing. Patrick, this goes to you. I want to ask you this question. You note it and then you respond. It's your paper framed around the 1940 to 1942 dysentery epidemic, or is it on it? Note my prepositions. Is it framed around the dysentery or is it framed on it? That's one. Because most of what I heard you discuss is actually around the social history of this dysentery. One does not get the idea of what really transpired in the period of the dysentery. You started from before the dysentery, and then one does not see what happened during the dysentery. If you ask me exactly how that dysentery was curbed and how it started in the first instance, I may not say from your presentation. So going back to the question that I had asked, is it around the dysentery break between this period, or is it on it? That's very important. Then again, we did not get the voice, and this goes to many of the presentations. We did not see the agency of the people, the local people. We only had you interpret what the colonial system tried to do here and there, but we didn't see, we didn't hear the people. I think you should take that, even though you said you had gone to the archives, but you should take that to account. We need to hear the people so that we know that we are writing authentic African history. So you know that, you may respond. My friend Ordinaka, the paper is very interesting, but again, there is also the challenge of agency and the voice of the leprosy sufferers. I didn't hear you say one thing about them talking and not you talking either through the secondary text. So we didn't get to see them, we didn't get to hear them. I think it's important when you are writing about leprosy and the Igbo worldview. We have heard about how the people, segregated them and did a whole lot of stuff, but we didn't get to hear them. And then again, there's something which I think you should also consider when you are putting the paper together. I have read a couple of articles on this theme, both within the Nigerian context and within Igbo land. And I see a lot of cooperation between the missionaries in tackling the challenge of leprosy. I see a lot of cooperation between the missionaries. I see a lot of rivalries between missionaries. So you discuss Christianity, but we didn't get to see how these Christian missionaries, cooperated towards the goal of combating leprosy in Igbo land. And then we didn't also get to see how, there are a lot of politics in discussing the Igbo worldview. We didn't see the early anthropological reports about what these other people thought. Because to present this account, not say these are what people thought, then people that made the intervention and changed in the thinking, these were the original thoughts that they had. So I think you need to broaden that into the early intelligence reports and anthropological accounts. So you consider that and maybe give a response to that when you are responding. Now for Ona, Miss Ona, your paper is very interesting, but I want to take you up on something that appears very contradictory that you said in the course of the presentation. You said that the indigenous healing methods are still very efficacious. You said it on one hand, that they are still very efficacious. And then you also said again that there is a tendency for them for the healing powers to desert them when they begin to, collect money and essentially monetize what they do. So I want to ask now, there's a seeming, because a lot of them collect money these days. Whole lot of them collect money. In fact, some of them have gone to even collecting outrageous some money from people. So how do we balance the monetization of this craft on one side, and still when they collect money, the healing powers appear to desert them? So I want you to balance that. I didn't get that very clearly. And for Uguja, I want to ask this: why the Nsukka culture area and then Dibiara? What's the point of diverture between the other Igbo culture groups and the Nsukka culture? What is fantastic about Dibiara in Nsukka? We didn't get to see that. Otherwise, we could the equivalency could be that this is DBR in Nsukka can serve any other part of Ebola, but you have singled out Nsukka for closer examination. And you must have to tell us what is interesting about this DBR in the Nsukka culture area, unlike other parts of Ebola. So there are other questions, but because of time, I know you will have to take about 30 minutes to respond to this, and then the comments from the audience. So I will restrict the observations I've made to just these questions. So in that same order that the presentation was made, I will respond questions directed at you, and then to do it direct. And these are ones that we are sent on the chat box, you also respond to them. So 3 minutes to do part.
Yeah, doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can go.
Sorry, I've been struggling with my network. Please, you know the situation down here. Actually, I think I only got the first part of what you were trying to ask, like if the dysentery epidemic or my paper is actually on or around.
Is it on the dysentery or around it? Yes, that's the question.
Okay, well, it's a technical question, but then I think I will start by saying it is on the dysentery epidemic because I consider it within the framework of historical studies, which is causes and consequences. The cause being the dysentery epidemic, the trajectory, the morbidity, and the mortality, and the sanitary measures that were being put in place by colonial government, the consequences, the reactions of the people, particularly from the Ututu ancient women, where I could have actually left some key points out in the course of presentation, but the paper actually is on the dysentery epidemic, actually.
It's okay. I love how you responded to it now. So that if that is the framing that you want to use, that's perfect. Because just like you said, you omitted some of this. I didn't get to see the cause. I didn't get to see the causes, but you dwelt a lot more on the consequences, right? So if you use this framing in putting up that research, I think it's going to be perfect, all right? It's going to be good. So thank you for that response. And that's why I asked the question. So when you are writing, you know really whether you are at liberty to round around it. But the title suggests that it is on it because it says dysentery epidemic in Arochukwu, Owerri province, 1940 to 1942. So I suggest that your response is okay in that way. Second question, can you respond to the questions?
All right, thank you very much. The first question on agency of the people. This is like a background. This is like a background to my thesis because my thesis is all around centering on the agency of the people. So this paper is actually meant to like foreground my discussion. So what I'm trying to do here is to try to interpret the different ideas or the different ways in which the Igbo cultural worldview contradicted or were in sync with the mission ideas about leprosy and some other little external factors that acted on this idea that began to change the way that people think about leprosy or how they perceive leprosy, if you like. So talking about the agency of the people, my thesis is actually centered on the politics of leprosy disease control in southeastern Nigeria, in eastern Nigeria, sorry, looking at the local contestations, what the people were doing, not what the missions were doing, how they were contesting for their land, how they were contesting for where to establish segregation villages and all that. But that is not like the focus of this paper. This paper is just made to let the background for someone who does not know Iran to understand how these people view leprosy before delving into the main discourse. It's because the question of agency is very, very important to me as an Africanist. Secondly, the cooperation between missionaries and the people, I must say that, well, from what I have, the findings that I have now, there were areas of agreement and also there were areas of disagreement. And in most cases, these things were not actually, they didn't actually go the way that the missionary had envisioned it, because it is one of my long arguments, that even though that the in the 1940s, after the post-World War, leprosy, they began to treat leprosy with drug therapy, which was effective. Healing their body did not mean reintegrating them into the society. It didn't mean a lot of things. So in that way, you see that even though there was cooperation, because even in Ozakoli, many people in the Owerri province, we go to their villages and began and report the missionaries due to the propaganda. And then they began to report that, okay, see, we have this population of leprosy sufferers in our midst. We like to establish leprosy village here and there. But at the same time, there was this idea of leprosy, of what it meant in Igbo cosmology, and also the image, did not really change. It was a complex situation in which there were varying things, and there were varied interpretation, and also varied conclusions can be reached. And on an anthropological report, I didn't have more time to dwell on Igbo cosmology, how we view, like how we interpret our cosmos, like from what the Igbo people think about the existence, how the Igbo people live their life, and all that. But I made the central, trying to summarize the central argument that the Igbo worldview is anthropocentric in nature, which means that life is participatory, right? And everybody that exists within life, every other thing that you do centers on land. And for you to be able to be celebrated, or for you to have hope of eternity, say to say, you must be buried properly. But most leprosy sufferers in pre-colonial Igbo land did not receive that, and all that. So that was why I didn't like dwell more on that, because of time. I hope I answered all the questions. And I also comment on some questions that are here by Matthias Isian Chokode. He was asking about if I consider the leprosy during the colonial wars and interwar years, and how did they survive? Actually, that is not the focus of my paper, and I would like to consider this for further research, but that is not the focus of my paper at the period. But I will surely look into that. And also generally commenting on what Dr. Obiani said about how the youth of today are going back to African traditional religion. Well, yeah, that is an ongoing discussion event that needs more observation. Is a growing trend, and we must continue to watch it and slowly begin to consider the implication of this movement in all ramifications of life, not only in our traditional religion, but also in our overall existence as a generation.
Okay, thank you, Odinaka. I think you've exceeded the 3 minutes allotted to you, but thank you. Those were very thought-provoking responses. And please go to the Q&A, and as you make your responses in line with the questions sent to you from your co-presenters and the ones I have also posed, you could also summarize by responding to some of the questions that were directed at you from the Q&A. So the next person is Oluchi Jacinta. Could you please respond to the questions, and then if there are anyone directed at you from the Q&A, you respond. You have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Okay, good.
Thank you so much. Like from the question here, like the one Patrick asked, he asked if there are like these medical practices, if it is restricted to certain gender. Like in the course of my research, all gender can practice these medical practices. They can practice those medical practices. Both the midwifery, even men practice it. The psychiatry, like one of the psychiatrists that I met was a woman, and there's another one that was also a man. So it's not gender based. Another question that Peter asked was, he asked if like how the individuals could make the government. I think that was what he's trying to ask here. How the individual could make the government, that's the practitioners, how they could make the government to recognize traditional medicine. They are already organizing themselves, both at the local government area, even at the state level. Just that for now, the government uh, haven't recognized them that much. But the more there's more need, like these practitioners should engage like these testimonies from the patients that they were able to cure. They could, like from the testimonies, and also they should be writing petitions, because I asked one of like the person in charge of the meet in this community if they have written anything to the government to recognize the meeting that they are having. He said no. So these traditional practitioners to health practitioners, they are also supposed to be writing to the government. Even if they do not respond, they should keep on writing to them. Okay. And there is a question here by Chimakore, but I don't understand this question very well. He said that, do you think that the healing system will be a way of understanding African traditional medicine? I don't know if this medicine is trying to ask here or what, but how I understood this question is that the healing systems, yes, will help in understanding of the African traditional medicine, because the African traditional medicine or the Igbo worldview is of the view that life is important. Even in the names, you can see things like Ndubisi. So their worldview, they view life is very important, and they are highly a kind of religious, bound to their chi. These rituals, as I told you the course of my presentation, these rituals could see like it is a way of knowing the Igbo worldview about everything they do. They are highly religious and they also have value for life. So this health system, the rituals in this health system will help in understanding not only the traditional medicine, but also the worldview of these people, um, that is the community or the medical practice in this community. And the question being asked by Ngozi Obiani, okay, she's of the view that, okay, that the shift away from Christianity to Christianity, if we think that okay, if we think that it
You have
affected
answered the question. Go on, go on. It's for all of go on.
Okay, okay, okay. The perception, if people, this has affected people's perception. During the course of my research, this wasn't actually what I was researching on, but from the knowledge I'm able to get from my informats, most of them, like during the pandemic, most of them returned to traditional medicine. They were that they closed, they shut down the churches, so that they are going back to traditional medicine. So this going back to they are going back to traditional religion, sorry. So this also made some people started viewing things associated with traditional with the traditional sector, such as even the traditional medicine. But this kind of trend is still of recent, and that more research is to be done on it. But now we can't really conclude that this is this, because it is still emerging, or we have to look into it and still
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you so very much. From Uja, please, questions that were directed at you and those that have been asked on the chat and the Q&A, combine them together when you make your response.
Okay, thank you very much. In Patrick's question, I'm confirming his answers. Traditional medicine is not gendered in state as a whole. Even a child that can be able to tell his right from left can be able to practice traditional medicine. So it's not gender based or limited to a particular gender or a particular age grade. Probably people, kids are old enough to know their left from right can practice traditional medicine. Also, in answering Sachima's question on Odinaka's question, which I think are actually similar. That's Satima's question was how can we promote psychiatric medicine to the wider world? And Odinaka's question is what can the government do to promote traditional psychiatric healing? So in answering these questions, which are similar, of course, I'm going to say that one way that traditional psychiatric medicine can be promoted is maybe through a change of narratives of the way traditional medicine is portrayed in African movies, especially Nollywood. Traditional healers are portrayed as being evil, and their actual craft of healing is never mentioned in movies. Also, it's quite unfortunate that the government makes these traditional healers to register their businesses before they can be able to practice. Because according to the traditional healers I met in Osaka, they were made to register their business. If they register, they don't have things to function. Whereas there's no help from the government to actually promote them or make them more visible to the public. So this is something that the government should actually do, not just to make them to register their business. They should also an avenue where the government also promotes them in turn as a result of that success, because they have proven track records of success in healing psychiatric patients. Also, in the case of Emmanuel Obu, the traditional doctor that combines his healing with rehabilitation, government can just take up that particular deed that the man actually promotes it. So many youth are from drug abuse, and this man that is located in a rural area is actually helping this youth to overcome this drug abuse and addiction. So such a man can actually be promoted by the government and made to be a means of promoting traditional psychiatric healing. His method of rehabilitating young that have been subjected to drug.
Please take the question that I asked you before we start to summarize. What is so sad about DBI culture as against culture area? Why do you consider that culture area interesting?
Okay, I'll actually say what made me to consider Nsukka area is because of I'm from Nsukka, so I was actually interested in knowing the method psychiatric and the successes of psychiatric healing in the Nsukka area. There's not actually been much literature on psychiatric healing in the Nsukka community, so it's also one of the reasons which prompted me to look at Nsukka psychiatric traditional healing. Also, in answering Matthias's question on what is the nexus between psychiatric hospitals and the current state of indigenous healing in Nsukka, I can say that it's actually a case of dependency, because psychiatric doctors actually depend on traditional psychiatric healers, in the sense that sometimes they bring their patients from these hospitals, traditional healers, to come and heal them. That's because they're not actually able to cure such patients. From the accounts of traditional healers that I made, they say that such orthodox medicine will just make a patient to just stay on drugs for the rest of their lives. But when they come to them, they'll just take maybe 3 to 6 months, and then the patients will be free from the madness. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Please, if there is any member of the audience whose question has not been answered, just indicate in the chat and I will direct it to the person in the next 3 minutes. And while we await for that, Patrick, I can see your hand. Quickly, just 1 minute. Patrick.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Alex. Actually, I think Matthias Isiani asked a question about methodology. Said if I actually use ethnographic research techniques. Okay, so I want to just address that. We're considering the time frame I was looking at. It wouldn't have been possible for me to use ethnographic, research techniques. As a historian, I actually employed the historical methodology, which prompted me to engage in the work with archival sources as well as the existing secondary sources on that subject matter. Of course, ethnographic research techniques basically are for anthropologists, maybe sociologists as well, based on their techniques. But I think that was a nice observation as well. Thank you very much, Matthias. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Jita, 1 minute. Jacinta, you were raising your hand.
Okay, you kind of asked a question that I contradicted myself by saying that traditional medicine practitioners, that they don't collect much money, and that in the place I also noted that one of the rich taboos is iriruogu, which is if a practitioner collects much money, that the efficacy of his medicine will lessen or decline. So this this is one of my discoveries. According to some of these practitioners, they noted this, but they said that if, like the teacher, as I've mentioned during my presentation, that if the teacher tells an individual to collect this and he exceeds this is just a belief, because I noted that it is a kind of spiritual, if you remember, because of my presentation, that is a kind of spiritual. So that is it. But in real essence, from my informant, they collect lesser amounts. Just that the practitioner of the belief that if you extort much money, this is their belief that it is. So I'm trying to bring out what they said and what I've come to discover. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think at this material time, we'll have to, call it a day. We have already been notified that we have about just minutes. So I want to thank you, Patrick Obaleke, for that wonderful presentation, Odinakeze, for that your interesting paper on leprosy, and Bina Ubuja for that work on DBR, and then Oluchi Jacinta Ona. It has been a very interesting convo, and I thank all of you. We will now call it a day. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.